Welcome back to the Growl with Hank, episode 18. I am your host, Hank Brewski. And what a heavy weekend to come back to. President Trump declared the Iran ceasefire over on Friday. Since then, the U.S. military has struck more than 300 targets across Iran in 3 separate waves. 140 targets Saturday alone. Iran hit back at U.S. bases in Kuwait, Bahrain, Qatar, Jordan, and Oman. 3 people were injured in Qatar by falling debris. Bahrain went into shelter-in-place mode twice. And this afternoon, U.S. forces struck 3 sites in Abadan, Iran. 2 civilians killed, 3 wounded. The war I have been covering since episode 1 is back, full speed. Senator Lindsey Graham of South Carolina died Saturday night at 71. Aortic dissection. He had just returned from Ukraine Friday. President Trump said he spoke to him at 7 p.m. Saturday. Graham was gone by 8. Whatever you thought of his politics, and I know I have listeners on all sides, he was a U.S. Senator for 20 years, chair of the Senate Budget Committee, and one of the last of the old-school foreign policy hawks. The loss of a senior senator is a loss to the institution. We will talk about him. Toronto, Saturday night. The Salsa on St. Clair Festival. 13,000 people. Music, food, kids. 2 men opened fire in a crossfire. 2 dead. 4 to 6 injured. No arrests. Sound familiar? It should. Episode 13 covered Toledo. Now Toronto. Community celebrations keep turning into crime scenes. Plus, federal agents raided the homes of New York Times journalists Friday night. The Minnesota governor is pulling his National Guard out of D.C. Hundreds of masked white nationalists marched in the Capitol on the 4th of July, and Keystone Pipeline just agreed to a $26.9 million penalty for a 2022 oil spill in Kansas. Coffee up. This one is heavy. Let us go. Time for the Bears Brew. 4 stories. Let us go. Friday, July 11th. President Trump posted on Truth Social that the ceasefire with Iran, quote, is over. He also said that talks would continue, which is a curious way to run a war and a negotiation at the same time, but here we are. The trigger was a container ship. Late Friday, Iran's Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps attacked a Cyprus-flagged commercial vessel in the Strait of Hormuz. The ship caught fire. Its engine room was damaged. A crew member is still missing. Iran says the ship was using an unauthorized route. The U.S. says Iran has no authority over international waters. That disagreement has been the ceasefire's fundamental problem for 6 weeks. Saturday night, U.S. Central Command launched the biggest strike wave of the war so far. 140 Iranian military targets in a single night. Missile sites, drone sites, coastal radar, ammunition depots, Iranian air defenses. And here is a first. CENTCOM says it used, quote, one-way attack aerial drones and one-way attack sea drones for the first time. Sea drones. The Iran war just became the first American war in which we deployed one-way sea attack drones. That is not a footnote. That is a new chapter in modern warfare. And we set the precedent right there. Iran struck back. Missiles and drones aimed at U.S. bases in Kuwait, Bahrain, Qatar, Jordan, and Oman. 3 people hurt in Qatar by falling debris during interceptions. Bahrain issued shelter-in-place orders twice in 2 days. Air raid sirens ringing across the Gulf for the first time since April. The U.S. launched a 3rd wave of strikes Sunday night. Dozens more targets. Explosions in Bushehr. Iranian aircraft hangar burning in Omidyeh. And today, Monday, U.S. strikes hit 3 locations in Abadan, in Khuzestan province. Iran's state broadcaster says 2 civilians were killed. 3 wounded. This includes at least 1 water pumping station whose security guard died, and a telecommunications tower. Look, I am a veteran. I know that in any prolonged conflict, civilian infrastructure gets hit. I also know we cannot verify Iran's numbers because Iran has an interest in inflating them. But I know we hit civilian sites. CENTCOM's own release listed telecom towers among targets. This is what modern war looks like. What does this mean for you? Gas is climbing again. National average is at $3.87 to $3.92. That is up 8 to 13 cents from last week. Brent crude is bouncing between $74 and $85 a barrel, depending on the day. And the Strait of Hormuz, which carries about 20% of global oil, is only partially open. 6,000 seafarers are stuck in the waterway right now, according to the UN. And listen, on episode 15 back in June, when the deal was signed, I gave you what I called cautious optimism. I said we watch through August 21st. I told you the hardliners on both sides could kill this before then. Here we are, July 13th, 5 weeks early. This war is back. I take no pleasure in being right about the caution. The UN Secretary-General Antonio Guterres called for maximum restraint over the weekend. Pakistan says it is ready to keep mediating. Oman has drafted a two-route proposal for strait management. Diplomatic paths still exist, but nobody is on them right now. Saturday night, around 8 p.m., emergency medical crews responded to a call for cardiac arrest at Senator Lindsey Graham's Capitol Hill home. CPR was in progress. Paramedics carried Graham out on a stretcher. He was pronounced dead. He was 71. The medical examiner in D.C. ruled the cause was aortic dissection. That is, a tear in the wall of the aorta, the main artery leading out of the heart. It was caused by arteriosclerotic cardiovascular disease, hardening and narrowing of arteries. Graham had reportedly been in Kiev earlier in the week, meeting with President Zelensky. He returned Friday. On Saturday, he had dinner and, according to Trump, phone called him at 7 p.m. Trump said Graham sounded tired but fine. An hour later, he was gone. Let me tell you what Graham represented, because whatever your politics, this loss touches the institution he served in. Graham served in the U.S. House from 1995 to 2003, then took over Senator Strom Thurmond's seat and served ever since. Nearly a quarter-century in the Senate, chair of the Senate Budget Committee at the time of his death, served on Appropriations, Judiciary, and Environment and Public Works. He was one of the last of a specific breed of Republican senator, a defense and foreign policy hawk, best friends with Senator John McCain and Senator Joe Lieberman, the three amigos, they called themselves. All three were passionate about American support for Ukraine, Israel, and NATO. All three believed in what political scientists call, quote, primacy, that America has to shape events overseas before hostile powers reshape them. Graham died the same weekend the Iran war restarted. Graham had been pushing the Trump administration to take a hawkish stance on Iran since day one. He was probably the loudest Iran hawk in the Senate. The timing is haunting. Fair to note it. What does his death mean for the Senate? Republicans had a narrow 53-47 majority. With Graham gone, and with Senator Mitch McConnell of Kentucky on extended medical leave for an undisclosed condition, Majority Leader John Thune is now working with an effective margin of 51-47. Every big vote just got harder for the Trump administration. The Save America Act, an election bill that would require photo ID and citizenship proof to vote, was co-sponsored by Graham. It is stalled in the Senate, and its path just got harder. South Carolina Governor Henry McMaster will appoint someone to serve Graham's seat until January 3, 2027. Under South Carolina law, a special primary election on August 11th will select the Republican nominee for the November 2026 general election. Representative Nancy Mace has already said she is, quote, strongly considering entering that race. Watch that field grow this week. One personal note, Senator Chris Coons of Delaware, a Democrat, said on ABC that he loved Graham, quote, like a brother, which means when I fight with him, I want to kill him, but that when I see the good that he wants to do for our country, I forgive him. That is what actual political friendship across party lines used to look like. We do not see enough of it anymore. On his loss, from someone who tangled with him, that friendship is a real testimony. Our thoughts to his family. His sister Darlene, whom he raised after their parents died. That is who he was, from the beginning. A man who took care of his people. May he rest in peace. Saturday night, Toronto. The Salsa on St. Clair Festival. This is one of Canada's biggest annual Latin culture celebrations. 13,000 people in attendance. Music playing, food vendors, families out, kids on their parents' shoulders, a neighborhood party. At some point during the evening, gunfire erupted. According to Toronto police, 2 men opened fire on each other in the middle of the crowd. Just like Toledo in June. 2 dead. Between 4 and 6 others wounded, some seriously. The festival's second day was canceled. 2 firearms have been recovered across 3 separate crime scenes. No arrests announced as of today. Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney and Ontario Premier Doug Ford both put out statements condemning the violence. Toronto's police chief called it, quote, senseless. That word again. I want to be direct with my American listeners. Canada has much stricter gun laws than we do. Handguns are heavily restricted. Assault weapons are effectively banned. And yet, in the middle of a family festival, two guys with beefs and firearms managed to turn a Latin culture celebration into a scene of terror. Because when someone wants to harm someone else, they find the tools. They find the moment. And the innocent people around them pay the price. In episode 13, when the Toledo Old West End Festival got shot up, I said something that still applies today. Two men with a personal beef, in a crowd, with handguns, 12 people caught in the crossfire, and I said, quote, that is not anti-gun, that is anti-stupid. The Canadian version of this is not gun availability, it is people who cannot control themselves in public spaces. Same story, different border. Community festivals are what hold neighborhoods together. What Toronto lost, what Toledo lost, is not just victims. It is trust. In the fabric of showing up on a Saturday night in your own neighborhood, kids are going to grow up in these communities, remembering the year the festival was canceled because two grown men could not act like adults. If you know something about the shooting, Toronto Police Crime Stoppers is 1-800-222-8477. Help them find these guys. Neighborhoods deserve to celebrate safely. Last story. A bunch of things you need to know. Minnesota Governor Tim Walz is pulling his state's National Guard out of D.C. early. This is part of the National Guard patrol thing we covered in episode 17. Trump has had multiple states send Guard troops to D.C. Democratic governors have been pushing back. Walz is the first to formally withdraw his troops. Illinois' J.B. Pritzker and California's Gavin Newsom are reportedly considering the same. Watch this space. It is going to matter come the 2026 midterms. Federal agents from the FBI raided the homes of multiple New York Times journalists Friday night. The Times says agents were trying to force reporters to testify before a grand jury next week. The reporters had been investigating classified national security matters. This is one of the most aggressive uses of federal law enforcement against journalists in modern American history. Press freedom groups are alarmed, and they should be, because the same power used against Times reporters can be used against Fox reporters, or Newsmax reporters, or any journalist who does work someone in power does not like. Watch this one. Hundreds of masked members of Patriot Front, a white nationalist group, marched in Washington, D.C. on the 4th of July. They rode the D.C. subway together. They marched together, faces covered, uniform khakis and white shirts. This is a group the FBI has been tracking for years. Their public visibility is growing. You should know what they look like. You should know what they stand for. And you should know that AI-generated text messages designed to sound like political candidates are also being used to engage voters in the run-up to the 2026 midterms. This is where the country is right now. TC Energy, the operator of the Keystone Pipeline, agreed to pay a $26.9 million penalty for the massive 2022 oil spill in Kansas. That spill dumped 588,000 gallons of crude into a Kansas creek. Cleanup took years. This settlement is way less than the damage cost, but it is at least accountability. Take the win where you can. CDC is tracking an intestinal illness outbreak in 31 states. Diarrhea and nausea, source unknown. As of Sunday, health authorities are investigating. This is going to shape summer travel. Wash your hands. Check the CDC website before you travel. Cook meat thoroughly. Sports. World Cup quarterfinals. England beat Norway 2-1 in extra time. Jude Bellingham scored both goals for England. Wimbledon. Yannick Sinner of Italy beat Alexander Zverev of Germany in 4 sets to win his second consecutive men's title. 5th career Grand Slam. A dominant year. Also, Qatar's former Emir Sheikh Hamad bin Khalifa Al Thani died at 74. He was the father of the current Emir. Founded Al Jazeera in 1996, was pushing Middle East peace between rival states for the last decade. His death matters because Qatar is one of the mediators between the US and Iran right now. His son and successor are steady, but he was the family's grand strategist. Watch how Qatar's mediation role holds through the summer. Pause and effect time. And today I want to take stock. Because we have been covering the Iran war since episode 1, since February 28th. That is over 4 months now. And with the ceasefire officially dead, this is a good moment to ask, what have we actually learned? 6 lessons from Hank's coverage. Take notes. These apply to every American war going forward. Lesson 1. Ceasefires collapse over the details, not the big picture. When the US and Iran signed the MOU on June 17th, the big picture was clear. Stop shooting. Reopen the strait. Start nuclear talks. What actually collapsed the deal? A container ship attack over Iran's claim to control the strait routes. When we thought we solved it in June, we had actually only postponed it. The devil is in the maritime routing details, and those details matter more than we ever admit. Lesson 2. When you rush announcements, you build fragility. Back in episode 11, we covered the flip-flop. Trump announced the deal was largely negotiated. Then he walked it back the next day. When you build a ceasefire on public announcements instead of quietly completed negotiations, the pressure to announce success outpaces the reality of the work being done. Every rushed public statement that outstripped the actual diplomacy is a crack that widened when the pressure came back. Lesson 3. New weapons mean new precedents. In the last week alone, the U.S. Navy deployed one-way SEA attack drones for the first time in American military history. Autonomous drones designed to ram enemy vessels. That capability now exists. It is verified. It is public. Every navy in the world knows what we can do. And every navy in the world is now going to develop counter-drones and their own attack drones. Whether you support this war or oppose it, the precedent we set on July 12, 2026 is permanent. Somebody else will use it against us within the decade. Bank on it. Lesson 4. Diplomatic mediators matter more than diplomats. The negotiations that got us to June 17th did not happen because a U.S. envoy and an Iranian envoy sat down. They happened because Qatar and Pakistan carried messages back and forth. The formal talks have been indirect the whole time. Neither side is willing to sit face to face. That means whoever mediates has an outsized influence. That is why Qatar's former emir dying this week matters more than it seems. That is why Pakistan's continued willingness to mediate is more important than a formal U.S. envoy. Lesson 5. Oil moves faster than anyone predicts. Every prediction I have seen from experienced analysts about oil prices this year has been wrong. Wrong in April. Wrong in May. Wrong in June. Wrong now. When a war involves the Strait of Hormuz, the assumptions we use to predict oil prices in normal times just do not apply. If you are planning a road trip, if you are budgeting a family vacation, if your business relies on shipping, build in wider ranges than any expert is telling you to build in. Lesson 6. Domestic institutions weaken during long wars. This might be the biggest lesson. Every long-running war in American history has hurt domestic institutions. Vietnam wrecked public trust in government. Iraq wrecked media credibility. Afghanistan wrecked our ability to hold cabinet officials accountable. And this Iran war, only 4 months old, has already contributed to the FEMA politicization we saw in episode 17, the National Guard deployments to American cities in episode 17, the White House commercial event with corporate sponsors in episode 15, and now, the raid on New York Times journalists Friday. Wars change how a country operates at home, almost always for the worse. What can you do with these 6 lessons? 3 things. Number 1. Push your representatives to demand a real congressional debate on Iran. We have been at war 4 months. Congress never voted to authorize it. It is time for that vote. If Republicans support the war, vote for it. If Democrats oppose it, vote against it. Either way, take a vote. Number 2. Ask your candidates for the 2026 midterms about oil independence. Not slogans, not, quote, drill baby drill, real questions. What is your plan to reduce our dependence on foreign oil? What is your plan to prevent gasoline from spiking every time a foreign country breathes on the Strait of Hormuz? Get real answers before you vote. Number 3. Support institutions that have been eroded during this war. Local police forces that have been demoralized by guard deployments. Local journalists working their beats without federal raids. Local election officials protecting the vote. These are the boring things that matter more than the loud things. 18 episodes, 4 months. a war that keeps not ending. And the biggest lesson is that we still have not learned the ones the last few wars tried to teach us. Let us try harder. Time for the growl. And this week, I am growling about the raid on the New York Times journalists. Friday night, July 10th. Federal agents showed up at the homes of multiple New York Times journalists. They were trying to force those reporters to testify before a grand jury next week. The reporters had been investigating classified national security matters. Their sources are inside government. The government wants those sources exposed. And instead of subpoenaing the newspaper or subpoenaing the reporters at work, agents went to their homes, at night, to try to intimidate them into cooperating. Let me be direct. Freedom of the press is one of the top 3 amendments in the Bill of Rights. Number 1 on the list. First Amendment. Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof, or abridging the freedom of speech or of the press. Those words are in the Constitution because the founders had watched British soldiers try to intimidate colonial printers. They knew that when the government can silence newspapers, it can hide anything. And they built protections directly into the fundamental law of the country to make sure that never happened here. Now, I am going to be a bear about this in the way this show does. This is not new to this administration. Every recent administration has pushed the boundaries with journalists. The Obama administration prosecuted more leakers than any president up to that point. That included journalist source burns. That was wrong. I said so at the time. The Biden administration also went after journalist sources aggressively. I said so at the time. The Trump administration is now doing it more openly, more publicly, and with home raids. And I am saying so now. Here is the specific concern. When agents raid a journalist's home, instead of using a subpoena at their workplace, that is intimidation. The message is not just, "We want your notes." The message is, "We know where you live. Your family lives there, your kids sleep there. We can come find you at any moment." That kind of intimidation has one purpose: to make sources afraid to talk to journalists. And when sources are afraid to talk, the public loses its window into what its government is doing. That is the purpose of press protection. It is not to protect journalists. It is to protect your ability to know what your government is doing in your name. Whose reporters are next? If tomorrow the DOJ has a beef with a Fox News investigation, the same tools will be used. If the year after that a Democratic administration has a beef with a Breitbart investigation, the same tools will be used. This is not partisan. This is a hammer that anyone in the White House can pick up. And once picked up, hammers get used. The specific solution is boring. Congress needs to pass a federal shield law protecting journalists from being forced to reveal sources except in very narrow national security emergencies. 49 states have shield laws for local journalists. There is no federal shield law. That is the gap. That is what needs closing. Call your representative. Ask them if they support a federal press shield law. Democrat and Republican, both. If they say no, ask them why. If they say yes, ask them what specific bill they support. This is the kind of dull, boring, institution-protecting work that keeps a free country free. Because I am telling you, as a veteran, as a guy who took an oath to defend the Constitution, I did not defend it against people who agreed with me. I defended it against people who disagreed with me. That is what the Constitution is for. To let people disagree, argue, expose, criticize, mock, praise, question, investigate. That is what makes America unique. Take away the press protection, and you take away a huge chunk of what we are. The government has plenty of ways to prosecute leakers. It does not need to raid journalists' homes at night to do it. That is my growl. That is episode 18 of the Growl with Hank. Quick recap. President Trump declared the Iran ceasefire over on Friday. U.S. Central Command has struck over 300 targets across Iran in 3 waves since. Iran has hit U.S. bases in Kuwait, Bahrain, Qatar, Jordan, and Oman. Today's strikes on Abadan killed 2 civilians. The U.S. Navy used one-way SEA attack drones for the first time in American history. Senator Lindsey Graham of South Carolina died Saturday at 71 from aortic dissection. The Republican Senate majority is now effectively 51-47, with McConnell also on medical leave. The Salsa on St. Clair Festival in Toronto became a mass shooting. 2 dead, no arrests. Minnesota Governor Walz pulled his National Guard from D.C. FBI raided New York Times journalists' homes Friday night. Hundreds of Patriot Front members marched in D.C. on July 4th. Gas is back up to $3.87 to 92 cents. Brent crude fluctuating $74 to $85. Take a moment today. Think about Senator Graham's sister, Darlene, who lost her big brother. Think about the families in Toronto who lost people at a festival. Think about the seafarers stuck in the Strait of Hormuz. Think about the Iranian civilians in Abadan whose only crime was being near a water pumping station. Think about the journalists at the New York Times who now know federal agents can come to their homes at night. These are the humans behind the headlines. If this episode moved you, share it, especially the growl. Federal press shield legislation is boring policy. Boring policy is exactly the kind of thing we need to talk about right now. Subscribe wherever you listen: YouTube, Spotify, Rumble, Apple Podcasts, Amazon Music. Leave a review, tell a friend. 18 episodes deep, the bear is not slowing down. Not now. Not when the news is this heavy. I am Hank Brewski. This is The Growl. Stay sharp, stay free, and I will see you next Tuesday.